So welcome everyone. It's really lovely to see all of you. I have done these talks for quite a while now, and we work out topics, and Sarah suggested that she'd really like a talk on IFS and neurodivergence, and so here it is. And it's an integration of three things. One is research and dissemination of other people's work. So one of the things I love doing is researching, and I've trawled for IFS and neurodivergence, and there's also some from emotionally focused therapy as well. Then my work as a UKCP and IFS therapist, and also as a neurofeedback practitioner, and also from my realizations about me. And then what I'd really hope at some point is that you come in and you talk a little bit, if you'd like to. I welcome feedback, and I welcome questions, and it's really important that I'm really a generalist, and I'm really I'm really not an expert here. So I have parts that are really concerned about offending people, and this is quite a massive topic, and it's a real, people's lived experiences, and then everybody's different, and so I'm just really letting you know that I'm a generalist, and my intentions are so good here, but I'm gonna get things wrong. So if you have things that you disagree with, let's talk about them. I'm really open for that. I obviously can't change the video, but I can in the notes. When I'm going to put all of this up on my website, so you can watch again if you want to, and I'll have these notes so that you can just reread them, and that's also for the people that can't be here today. I have a lot of parts with views about this talk, ones that don't want to offend and don't want to stick my neck out and get shot down. I did this 10 days ago, and I got really blended, and I began to panic, and I went into a bit of a shame spiral, and I'll talk about this later, but I did a U-turn, and I talked to inside, and I managed to come back and explain what parts were around, and hopefully it went okay. So I know that today I'm going to get blended. I have parts that are already a little bit blended, and I want you to know that it's also okay. I'm fine, and I'm hopefully modelling what I'm speaking. That's my intention. Which brings me on to, there's a concept about a safe space, and I'm going to move it to there's that sort of moved on. There's a concept of brave space. And I want to really acknowledge that for some of you, it's me, it's brave to come here to talk. It's brave to come here just to be in the room. So in a world where there's the sort of neurotypical, we'll talk about that, neurotypical bias, the neurotypical privilege, it's brave to be neurodivergent in a big space. Then there's the next one on is the accountable space. So, and this keeps tying in with IFS, and what we're talking about is I'm here, my intentions, my words, my actions. There's something about my accountability, and there's a call out here. There's a sort of my activist part wants to call out, let's be accountable. Let's have actions and words here. You'll hear more. So, making yourselves accommodations, making yourselves as comfortable as possible. You can sit, you can walk around. Please, if you stim. Don't be worried if you don't catch everything. It's going to be on the website, and it's going to be written down. I've had these amazing, well, to me they're amazing stickmen created. And I hope that for those that really like visuals, I will talk about them a little bit more. But so there's visual, and then there's a lot of words for those that like words. Please do wear headphones if you want to, in the breaks and things. So who have I read about? I've read And again, these will be written on the website. Sarah Bergenfield from CuriousHeart.com is an autistic therapist who has some really fantastic things to say about IFS and autism, and she has created these beautiful, from Marielle Pasteur, diagrams, and I'm going to just pass them around about the autistic system, and I'll talk a little bit more about her work. And Erin Findlay on neurodiversity affirmative, working with neurodivergent and mixed neurotype couples, and she's emotionally focused therapy. Kim Bowling on IFS and IFIO, which is the couples therapy, working with neurodivergent couples. Joanne Twombly does trauma and dissociation. Stephanie Mitchell is IFS and non-ordinary states, so bipolar and psychosis. And there's a wonderful thing called IFS Talks that I really love. And Yoav Bartov he's a therapist, and he has a wonderful talk on working with autistic clients. And I wanted to also say that some people have specifically asked not to be quoted, but I'm, big shout out to them for writing to me personally about things I can say in this talk. So, first of all, neurodivergence umbrella term, and for some it's just autism and ADHD, and I want to really expand that. So that could include CPTSD, so chronic post-traumatic stress, which I very much identify with, OCD, dyslexia, epilepsy, psychosis, Down syndrome, bipolar. This talk centres a neurodiversity affirming approach, which, we're all existing in a different kind of world. And Erin Findlay, in her talk, she talks about, the world is so full of biodiversity and millions of different species. And biodiversity is the most complex aspect of our planet and the most vital. We need diversity to maintain balance and to survive. The more genetic diversity there is, the better we are to continually adapt to our environment as it changes and as it evolves. Diversity helps humanity to flourish. A beautiful diversity of traits and abilities, minds that create stories, sense changes environment, that seek patterns. Some are distractible, some are focused, some are quiet, some are busy. It's all part of the biodiversity. So neurodiversity, being really clear, doesn't need curing in my view and the view of many. It's good and valid, and it doesn't need fixing. So Yoav Bartov makes the case that neurotypical is just as diverse as neurodiverse. And I thought that was really important. And we need language to describe things. So it's really helpful to have, to loosely capture some common traits. So that makes it easier to work with, but it's helpful to hold it more loosely and more lightly. So to cluster neurodivergence into one bunch is as useful as saying that everyone is neurotypical is the same. Everyone's brains are different, and there are many different neurotypes. So as a neurofeedback practitioner, I don't know if you know about neurofeedback, but you put sensors on your head and you read your brain waves. And it's absolutely fascinating. And what do I see is that everyone's brains are different, and there are markers. And my brain patterns vary from moment to moment and day to day, and over the lifespan, and in our lived experience. And both neurodivergent and neurotypical brains vary widely. Sometimes on my screen they have similar markers. So, none are broken, just different, like in nature. I'm going to talk a little bit about polyvagal, and then I'm going to talk to you about IFS. So, I'd like just to say that a couple of words about polyvagal theory. This can come round. This is our nervous system danger safety response before the conscious mind. So when I meet with you what happens in my body first and foremost. The physiology of our meeting is a really important thing. We are constantly going danger, safety, danger, safety, danger, safety. More quicker than that. So a really simple one is someone with Botox, or someone with a fake smile that doesn't reach their eyes, or someone with very flat affect. When my nervous system meets someone with Botox, for example, I start to panic. Initially, my danger, safety goes danger, 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 because in my growing up, the flat affect of my mum was really dangerous. So luckily, we can talk a little bit more. We're going to talk about self and soothing and calming, but there are ways of helping me soothe my nervous system to regulate, to relax, and I can co-regulate and as time goes on. There's something called the vagal brake, which I can bring in the dorsal vagal system and the ventral vagal system to calm myself down. But before we get to parts, nervous system comes in first. And I've just put my little diagram here that I created is me meeting someone else. And so I've just put a little nervous system thing here. And then we'll talk about parts in a minute. So, internal family systems. Just going to explain it for those who don't know about it, and I'm going to, for those that do, hopefully spiral learning. So we are multiplicitous, and that's a good thing. We have lots of parts within us, little personalities within us that are, everyone has those. We're not just one person. And in IFS, we believe that they're trying to look after us. They're like a little army, or a little a group of personalities that are looking after us. And here's another little diagram. So it's like there's a self at the core. So I've put down here some words for self, which is Dick's words for self, Dick Schwartz's words for self, and they're around there. But if you're in the centre, you at your core, your parts are like the clouds. You are the conductor of the orchestra, and the parts are like your orchestra. You can invite them round a table, like the leader of an organisation, or you can be driver of the bus. You at the centre, the core, not broken, not broken. You're wonderful, wonderful you. It's an absolute fundamental of IFS that we each have a core self, and self is not broken. The qualities of the self are the 8 C's in IFS, so calm, curiosity, connected, curious, clear, creative, confident, compassionate. Can't remember which one I've missed, or maybe I have got all the 8 C's. And these C's show up also in the autistic and neurodivergent self as a little, as different. So Sarah's thing that's going round includes stimming and other things that you can see when she's going round. And Dick is very much of the view that ourselves meet somewhere, that there's a higher collective self, whether you believe that or not. But somehow it seems to work for me that myself, I have more qualities of this and more, maybe less qualities of that, and I can meet yourself somewhere. And for me, that resonates. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but for me, somehow it does resonate, that ourselves somehow meet. Yes, so I missed that bit out. Sarah Bergenfield has identified other characteristics of the autistic self. Qualities being regulated, safety, ease, contentment, space. So IFS calls the protective parts that are proactive managers. These are the ones that try and get us to look good so we don't get rejected. So thinking, planning, organising, judging, blaming, controlling, self-critic, those sorts of parts. I know I've got to somewhere here. There we go. So these are there's me and there's my managers. And then we all have feelings that we want to sort of squidge down, and because we've been hurt. All of us have been hurt in the past. So these we call exiles, and they're things like lonely, rejected, abandoned, sad, powerless, helpless. And then when those come up in everyday relations, because they will, because we live in community, or even when we're our own, I can do that to myself, up come the firefighters. And the firefighters are the ones that are focused entirely on keeping these guys squidged down. And so they're things like rage and shopping and scrolling and alcohol and fantasy, having affairs, suicidal thoughts. So firefighters. And isn't it, the IFS view is very much that in the centre here is you. And if, there are polarities, there are arguments that happen within these little personalities within ourselves, and you at the centre have the overview, and if you get to know these parts, then, we can create balance and harmony. But what we tend to do is we try and sort of, the part that drinks hates the parts that trying to control you not to drink, and the cream cake eating part, hates the back and forth. You can just imagine. Well, I'm imagining you all have polarity. So IFS helps you to turn towards these parts and get to know them. So we will do a little meditation in a minute. Well, when we've done, but for those who are neurodivergent or who aren't, or come from different neurotype, and I invite you all to do the same work. So, how we're doing it, you're closing your eye. You don't have to do this now. I'm not literally meaning this unless you want to, but it's softening and closing your eyes and turning your focus inward. So you're coming inwards, and you're just waiting maybe, and say, hi to whoever's there. Would anyone inside like your attention? You might notice a voice coming to speak with you, or you might notice a body sensation. If you're triggered by something, or someone does, or someone says, focus there. Invite that part to come and speak with you. So we call this a U-turn. Start with a U-turn and see if you notice a reaction to someone or something. And then, you're contacting what you're noticing, the thought, the impulse, the sensation, the feeling. And something I'm going to come on to in a minute, is this my operating system, or is this just me? Is it protecting something? Hi, are you protecting me? And just wait and hear, is it protecting you or is it not? And then there's the 6 Fs, which I have on my website, or you can just look up on the internet. You're finding the part in and around your body, you're focusing on it, you're fleshing it out, finding out how it's, how you're seeing it in your system, and then you're making friends with it. This is about a 2-way relationship. Me meeting my part, self to part relationship. And then the massive question in IFS is, how do I feel towards this part? And if I'm feeling one of these selfie words, fantastic. Curiosity, ooh, I'm grateful. I'm feeling really calm. What if you're feeling sort of one of these, if warm-hearted, then that's great. And if you're going, well, I really don't like it, oh, well, that's another part. So you invite it to come and sit somewhere else in the room, or somewhere else in your mind. Get to know that one too. And then 2 main questions. It's what's it hoping to achieve? What's its mission? What's it trying to do for you? And then what's it frightened of? What's its fear? That's the last of the 6 Fs. And there's, again, on my website, there's a whole load of questions you can ask. How old is it? When did it first come in? How old does it think you are? Often parts come in certainly under 20, most of them under 10. You can, they get stuck there. They get stuck. So it's like, here I am at 51, and I've got a whole load of parts that are sort of like 6 and 4 and 2, and I'll come on to legacy burdens in a minute. And they think I am the same age, so I'm really having to catch them up from being that age to this age. So we'll give you a meditation afterwards to give you a taster, and there's loads on. Go and have a look on Insight Timer, IFS meditations. There's some really good ones, both with Dick Schwartz and others. And so I've got a WhatsApp buddy group in Stroud if you want to join that. You can send me a number and then you can meet up some practice. Just on protectors, you could find an IFS or an IFS informed therapist, and there are loads of Facebook groups. So I wanted to now move to neurology and parts, which is, really bringing the neurodiversity into this talk. That was IFS, this is now. It is damaging to neurodivergent folk to call neurology a part. Autism is not a part. Neurology is not a part. It can be really harmful to say this is a part when it's not. It sets up the idea that with enough work, these parts, and we can unburden them, they can experience healing and potentially not continue to experience them. So my intensity, I am so intense. I get so excitable. I get so hyper-focused on things. These are not parts. This is who I am. My sensory, I get so overwhelmed with. I've got one of those candles, and you light them, and it's got lavender, and whoa, can't cope. Just can't cope with it. It's just too much for me. That's not a part. That's who I am. It's the reaction I have to them afterwards that is where the parts come in, if that may. I'm seeing some nodding. Great. Who I am is not a part. It's super nuanced and complex. And as Yoav Bartov says, you can get into philosophical discussion, but it's really important. And if you can't work out whether it's a part or a trait, just keep really remaining curious, I'm going to suggest. Often the behaviour can be both. Sometimes it's just a characteristic. It's your operating system, like smell, how my brain works. The part is how I then react to it. If there's anxiety alongside it, then maybe that's a part. That's the part that takes over and stops self-energy. I'm seeing some nodding. Yes, so frustrated, apologetic, for example, those are parts. Noise might bother me, but not someone else. I notice there's a clicking talk. I can't even say it now. A ticking clock, and it gets really, really loud for me, and I can't concentrate on other people. And someone else might not even notice the ticking clock. How I deal with it is parts. Frustrated. Oh, yeah, well, I've said that, haven't I? We need to hold openness about them. Many of us know when it's a part. If we ask it, is it protecting you? Is it protecting me? I sort of know. Sometimes it's a self-like part, which we could talk about another time. But so doing this talk, I have been super excited about this talk, and I've spent hours doing it, and I'm so excited about it. That's not a part. That's not a part. When I am doing it because I really don't want to cook supper or do the laundry pile, maybe that's a part. But actually, the excitement and the hyper focus, that's not a part. I don't believe. It doesn't feel like it to me. It doesn't feel like it's protecting me. It just feels like creativity and joy and excitement. So, some suggestions. Yoav Bartov suggests that, am I experiencing rigidity because of my neurology, or do I have a part or exile? It's like a specialised brain, my super focus. It's not parts yet. ADHD, time blindness could be neurology, executive functioning, but it could also be serving someone by keeping hyper-focused on another engaging task. So, next thing I wanted to talk about was legacy burdens. Over time, things happen, and years and years ago, something happened in our ancestry, and a part is taken up, and then that part is given to the child, and it follows down. There's sort of epigenetics, and rules get passed on. So moving now to, that could be within your family, there's society and cultural. We live in a neurotypical privileged society where neurotypical norms are prevalent, and those get passed through the generations. And so rules, regulations of how to show up in the world so as to not feel whatever trauma originally happened. And the aftershocks continue through the generations. Sometimes we know the story, sometimes we don't. So just an invitation to, ask yourselves, what rules have I taken on about, how to be in the world, and sitting still and not walking around and not stimming. We all stim, we all self-stimulate. I pick my fingers, which is grim, but there's lots of work. Some self-stimming can be really joyful, and we all do it, but we all often, through the generations and in culture, we stop ourselves because it's not acceptable to others. So what about neurotypical societal cultural legacy burdens? We might call it ableism. Rules about bias, how those who are different to the norm should fit in, the way our lives are set up, make it easier for neurotypical folk. An implicit bias that neurotypical ways of doing things are better than neurodivergent, seeing them as the other, as less than us. And I want to say that I have swallowed some of these. I have legacy burdens that are ableist, and I can look at them and I want to really work on them. I have parts that judge. I have parts that, want perfection. I have parts that hold unconscious privilege. So how do you work with these cultural legacy burdens? Oh my diagrams, love it. So here's me with my massive rucksack of things that I have inherited from society and from culture, and getting to know these parts and getting to know the little one, that my inner child inside me who is holding the burden. So the exile. Don't do this in the buddy up group, please. But you're getting to know the little child and where they hold it in their bodies, and fundamentally where I'm holding it in my body, and do we want to let go of it? Is it yours, or is it someone else's? Has it come through the generations? Is this societal? Yes. Okay. So you then give the burden back through the generations. There's a lovely way of doing it in IFS. There's also folk round Stroud who do constellations and shamanistic work that you could do stuff with them. But so this is the little person giving back to previous generations the burden that they carry, because the previous generations don't actually want you to be carrying burdens. Their higher selves don't. And then it can go back to maybe a bonfire at the back, or into a lovely river or a lake, or into the sun or something. Or you can just open the window and let them go. We don't have to hold this stuff anymore. How does this all relate to neurodiversity? Quite explicitly, you're not broken. And I want to do 4 main things that you take away. It's highly likely that we've all, neurotypical, neurodiverse alike, have taken on legacy burdens from society and our own families, and accrued a ton of baggage living as neurodivergent, or living as a neurotypical, or whatever neurotype you are. Parts that have sensed danger or threat in someone's difference, and who have othered or watched others making comments, being hostile. These burdens and parts can be worked on using IFS. How amazing is that? So, number 1, headline: IFS is amazing with the divergent brain. It really works for so many autistic folk, and for ADHD folk, and for people with complex PTSD or OCD. It's a way of, often it's actually easier than for neurotypical folk. How amazing is that? It's a total gift, and I hope you find it a wonderful way of finding yourself. And this is crucial, forming internal secure attachment. We have been taught in society to form attachments out there, to, the prince clip-clopping over the horizon to complete us. That's a very gender stereotypical, my apologies, but I am trying to create internal secure attachment here, and it's possible. So there we go, forming a relation inside self to, I'm going to do this, self to part. Here we go, here's this little bonfire, and there's me in the middle, forming a relationship with my parts and my exiles. It's really fabulous I can use my own framework, my own relationship ways of being. I can use my own language, I can be direct, I can be unambiguous, I can connect to my parts. I can we can use what works for us. Some of you might see your parts, some of you might feel your parts, some of them hear your parts. And that's all fine. Some find, you can find parts in music or use creative modalities. There's a creative modality thing on my website, if that's interesting. It's really totally up to you what works for you. As Sarah Bergenfield, she says, using your own lexicon builds confidence and empowers you to feel you can be understood and can understand. You can be accepted internally. For some of us, this makes me want to cry, for some of us it can be the first time. I can't tell you how amazing this is to be accepted internally, to practice forming a secure attachment inside, to have relationships that work inside. The space and wonderfulness are not to be underestimated. So forming a relationship with yourself and it working. Number 2, you're not broken, you do not need curing. You're in this talk, so I'm hoping and I'm guessing you already know this. Neurodivergence is okay. It's part of the wonderful biodiversity of life. So interesting here, you at your core exactly as you're meant to be. And your allies, your family members, they're not broken either. How about the judges, the otherers? This is a difficult one. This was a really difficult one for me. They're not broken either. At their centre, they have a self, but they have protective parts that have come in to protect them. So there they are, right at the back, with an absolute army of parts. And yes, they might have hurt you, and I can really, I'm really not taking away from the damage that some of our parts cause, but their army is totally focused on protecting them. My army, totally focused on protecting me, my exiles. It's the invitation, even for us, for perpetrating parts, the invitation is to do the U-turn and get to know your parts and release those legacy burdens and heal the little ones so we can relate. 3, internal secure attachment is key. It's so radical. Learn to appreciate yourself and find the connection and acknowledgement you've yearned for outside. Enjoy the relationship within. Do a U-turn and get to know you, your fabulous self, your neurodivergent self, and know that it can be wonderful. You at the core, content, at ease, safe, with a family of inner personalities. Your parts all around you who are there to protect you. Amazing. It's so cool to get to know this array of personalities and for them to get to know you. And you can all rely on each other. They want to help you, they love you. I invite you to bask in those inner connections, in that secure attachment. I'm inviting you to fall in love with yourselves, really. So, for inviting you to join us in IFS land, come join in the adventure, learn to do the U-turn, learn to get to know your legacy burdens, get to know your parts, get to know what baggage you've accrued. And you can do so much of this on your own or with a therapist. Start forming self-to-part relationships and discover the amazing complexity and beauty of your own system, how endlessly fascinating you are. And then you can return. So we do the U-turn and then we return. I can really get to know what's going on inside me and what's happened when I've reacted to this. This is what's happening. This is what's happening inside me. And then I can return, and I have C. Sykes calls this the ninth C, choice. I have a choice to tell you, or I have a choice to put in a boundary, or I have a choice to stim, or I have a choice not to stim. But I've done my U-turn, and then I can return. So, just as a little step off, and again, this is from Sarah Bergenfield about what parts might come up. So when you're doing the work, these are what she's suggested for in her system, for an autistic system, but I'm imagining some of these will come up. You might recognise these in you, don't know. They come up for me. Managers. Here we go, managers, proactive people. Hypervigilant parts. These parts can identify feelings but not feeling into them at a somatic level. So lots of strong analytical and thinking parts. We tend to have controlling the environment parts, judging others, and internal critic. Caretaking, people-pleasing, wanting people to like me, us. Camouflaging, masking parts in the hope that we can belong. Masking is a parts-driven behaviour among autistics, she says. Managers mask to make sure we can stay functioning at expected levels or achieve success. Manager numbing parts as a way of life to help with the sensory overwhelm. Often the neurodivergent systems, particularly the autistic system, gets very overwhelmed with sensory overload. So these parts are all trying to protect, their intentions are good, and when we can meet them with our wonderful sunshine selves, when they are met and have connection to self, they can be proactive in keeping us safe and secure, collaborating with self, when to mask, when not to mask. They advocate for growth, they're problem solvers, they're competent and helpful. So there's a lot of hope. When you get to know your managers and you work with them, there's a lot of hope. Firefighting parts, reactive, intentionally soothing and calming, scrolling YouTube, substance abuse, cutting, suicidal thoughts, binging. Firefighters mask to avoid being bullied or seen. They can put us in dangerous situations that result then in overwhelm. So I imagine particularly substance abuse and things. When the Exile has come out and it's threatening to overwhelm the system, they storm the gates. Something that a lot of us do is we dissociate, sort of just take yourself out, take yourself away. Gaslighting others. So, for example, someone I know gets annoyed if I overreact or I'm irritated, and so I should just take their behaviour in my stride. I should just be easygoing. Firefighter parts are the unsung heroes in the system. They're often despised by managers, but they so want to help, to soothe, and when they have a relationship with self, when they're unburdened, they can pay attention to how the system feels and can signal the self when dysregulation is occurring, alerting the need for some self-soothing behaviours. I mean, really fantastic. Once you start to get to know these guys, they can come in and go, we need some soothing, we need some help here. So this is the real positive side of having, these parts with us. And they have a strong sense of justice and advocate for the system and for others. They are creative, adventurous, and fun. I love my firefighters. I hope you get to love yours. Exiles holding the pain of rejection, who themselves have been gaslit, who have received direct and indirect harmful comments, actions or inactions that make it known that we're different, not accepted, invalidated, not enough, annoying, worthless, broken, burdens of shame. Most neurodivergent folk that I know, have had a lot of rejection from the outside world. When the exiles are unburdened, they can come out and be excited and joyous and fun and spontaneous and bring adventure back into the system. So there's hope. So those are the parts that often come up in neurodivergent systems. So U-turn and then return. So now coming back into the outside world, you've, self-to-part relationships now coming back into the outside world. There's something in intimacy from the inside out, which is the couples therapy that I do. It's the IFS couples therapy, and we call it courageous communication, and it's absolutely glorious. And I'll talk more about it another time. But what we hope for in IFIO is a self-to-self connection, and so you've done your U-turn, you found out what your parts are saying, you found out what your exiles are saying, and what their needs are, and you make an invitation with someone else, and you say, could I have a word? And you can, say when you did this is what happened in me. This is what came up, and this is what my little ones are saying, and there's a way of really asking your needs to be met, and in a way that's immensely beautiful. So, and it's courageous for me to say what I have on my inside, and it's really courageous for the other to listen, having asked their parts to give them some space so that they can be there, and so you have a self-to-self connection. I mean, that's the hope. Wouldn't it be amazing to have a world where we can do that more and more? So, there's a real invitation here to, if you can, get to know your parts and get to know how you can unblend and ask them to step back so you can be there with someone else. Self to self. Double empathy. We're going to now coming back to, so that's courageous communication. Double empathy is the concept that each neurotype can get on find it much easier to get on within their own neurotypes. So neurotypicals tend to find it easier to connect in that way, and autistic folk find it easier to understand in that way too. So I'm not making it very clear, sorry. Telephone used to be called something else when I was little. Whispers. So if you had a certain neurotype over here and another neurotype over here and a mixed neurotype maybe over there, if I was to say whisper something and start here, say this is the neurotypical side, it would manage to go really well, and it would be a very similar message at the end. If I was to have a group of autistic folk here, and I did exactly the same thing, the message would get perfectly to the other side of the room. Mixed neurotype, absolute, it's likely to get really, really confused. And this is the double empathy problem, where we can get each other in one neurotype, but when we're trying to have a mixed neurotype relationship, it can get really complicated, and each group thinks the other one is getting it wrong, and not, and so the answer again is come from self. The more we can come from self with our fabulous, connected, curiosity is the big word here. If you can be curious, magic happens. And so this is where Erin really comes in. Erin Findlay, she gives this excellent talk, which I'll put on on the website. She encourages openness about brain types. So number one question is, how does your brain do that? My brain does this. And so being open and being curious about, some people like to focus in on details, and some people like a camera, and some people like to have the bigger picture. Some people use lots of nouns, some people use lots of verbs. Some I was saying about, I've got real sort of big thing about smells. Some people can't even notice smells. Some people love vast quantities of chili on their food, and some people, could, just the tiniest little speck of salt would be too much. Erin talks about, if you're in a sexual relationship, for some, she talks about a caress could be very difficult. It might be like feeling like knives for some on the skin, whereas for another, that might be really lovely. Being curious, no one's wrong, it's just we're different. I mean, I think that's amazing. Being curious. Processing language. Some people are very direct and say it exactly as it is. Some people love using sarcasm. It's checking things out, checking the cues, checking the, when you said that, can you talk to me about it? Help me understand. I mentioned the flat affect earlier. I used to experience mum's flat affect as really dangerous. When I see someone with a very flat affect, I immediately get anxious and scared. But actually, I can do my U-turn, and I can soothe myself, and I can go, actually, I can feel this body is friendly towards me, but I need to just check out, what is going on? When you're looking at me like that, are you actually angry with me? Because that's what the story I'm telling myself. And they're going, no, love you. And I'm going, okay, I thought you were really angry with me. Let's just check it out. Let's just be really curious. And being curious from a self place rather than in an I have interrogative parts. So knowing the difference between the two. So, what does everyone see? Perspective. Let's be curious. What's everyone seeing?
Well, I saw a tree, but then I saw something else.
Yes, so it's a tree and it's something else.
A wolf.
A wolf. Sorry?
A lion.
And a lion. Yeah, absolutely spot on. And once you see both, all three, you can't not see them. So my IFS colleague, Natasha Oswald, she works with autistic folk, and she writes, for autistic clients and their neurotypical family members, IFS has helped reduce anxiety and worry, increase self-esteem, improve mood, and create a more helpful outlook on life. Autistics and other neurodivergent folk often have an easier time communicating with their parts. And if we have an internal secure attachment inside and learn communication inside, that can be then transferred out to other people. And, with a security that actually I'm okay. None of us are broken. Neurodiversity is just like in nature. And we all might benefit from some nervous system regulation with U-turns and unloading legacy burdens. Forming a secure internal attachment and basking there. Then returning outside and making the choice of what needs to happen in each moment, and to have courageous communication or conversations one at a time. And so this is coming back to accountability and, my activist part. This is a real call for all of us to do this work. All of us. And we all need to step up and be brave and accountable and look at our own cultural and, ableist burdens and familial legacy burdens and parts. I believe we can do this in Stroud, this amazing community, in this town, in this room. I can feel the self-energy growing in this room each time, and I hope you can feel that too. Let's unearth and celebrate the beauty in the way neurodivergents think and experience the world. And leaving you on a really positive note, as Sarah Bergenfield says, she feels the view from here is a fine one.